Welcome to Overwatch, and welcome to a series I've had floating around in my head for a long time now. This channel has largely become centralized around, well, coaching, because I enjoy it and because it floats alongside the Twitch streams quite nicely. But it's time to expand on that. It's time to move more onto general instruction alongside the coaching. So welcome to a series where we explore Overwatch, its core concepts, why it's so fascinating, and why, as a game, it's actually extremely hard to master in all of its various facets. This series is largely going to use definitions as a focal point. We're going to take terms and explore them, what they mean, and how it can be useful to break the game down into these various aspects. So I'm going to start us off on the most high school presentation way I possibly can. The definition of definition, or at least how we're going to use it. The Oxford English Dictionary defines definition— no, please never start a presentation like that, as it's god awful and I feel bad for even doing it as a joke. Look, the thing is this, I'll be using the term definition pretty loosely. The main idea is that we'll all understand that we're talking about the same concept or idea by the time I'm done explaining something like positioning or economy and how it relates to Overwatch. If someone has a slightly different definition, I don't really care that much, to be honest. The idea is that you understand the concept of what I'm talking about, why it's important, and how you can use it to structure how you play and how you improve in your play. So this time we're going to talk about positioning. Positioning is one of the most important factors in gameplay because it determines so much about the flow of action, especially in a team-based game. No matter what your online gaming background, FPS, RTS, League or Dota or whatever, you probably have some innate idea about what positioning actually means. So I want you to take a moment, seriously just a moment, and try to define it. It's tricky, isn't it? Positioning, to me, is pretty simple. You just have to break it down into two parts to really explain it properly. Good positioning is putting yourself in the right place to be able to use your hero's kit and resources to the fullest potential possible at any given moment. Bad positioning leaves you in places where you cannot use your hero's kit and resources to the fullest potential. Let's elaborate. The key is understanding this kit and resources. I can't really think of an easier way to sum up everything that makes up a hero. So let's take Zenyatta, a hero extremely sensitive to positioning, as an example. Zenyatta's got some really important facts you've got to understand. He has a projectile weapon, not hit scan, with the ability to charge it up and fire a bunch all at once. He has a debuff with a relatively long range, a heal that only really needs line of sight to apply. I mean, there are a few areas in the game where you can't reach someone with the orbs, but they're not really that common. He's also only got 200 hit points, 150 which are shields, no extra mobility, and a very easy to hit little hitbox. So if we're going to use Zenyatta to his maximum potential, we're going to want to find places where we can maintain both of our orbs, shell out all of our damage, while also being very aware that we're exceedingly vulnerable to any kind of focus. What's really informative in his kit is the combination of his shields, which recharge when out of combat for a few seconds, and his ability to charge and prepare his shots. He can also track targets that are debuffed and buffed for about 3 seconds, meaning that you're completely fine breaking line of sight for a moment. Suddenly it becomes very easy to reason all of this back to the optimal place for a Zenyatta, right? Tucked safely either in or behind his team using a corner or some kind of terrain for cover, debuffing and buffing while shelling out live sways of damage on targets that he can track while he's completely safe. Most of the damage he takes, he can usually regenerate it, while he can line up his shots comfortably as well hidden around a corner. If necessary, he's fine poking out and simply using his left clicks to finish. Completely ideal positioning for a Zenyatta. Of course, you might not be able to get all of these things, but you can usually try and get a bunch of them. Being safe on your team, having a corner, stuff like that. A flawed argument for Zenyatta's positioning would run more like this: Zenyatta uses a projectile, therefore I should be up close to make it easier to land my shots. I mean, sure, that logic flows, but it clashes with the rest and the whole of his kit. And, well, the results speak for themselves, right? A Zen on the front line just tends to die. This is why I want to start with positioning, because it really does inform all aspects of Overwatch, from individual hero play, to playing as a team, to deploying ultimates, to engagement, to disengagement, everything. Punishment of bad positioning, setting up in good positioning, and knowing how and where to hold on various maps, it's one of the most overarching parts of playing Overwatch. So rather than going through every single hero, I want to give you the tools you need to figure out individual hero strengths and weaknesses and how you should position with them. Ask yourselves these questions. Does my hero engage at close, medium, or long range? Widowmaker can technically do damage across all distances, while McCree has severe drop-off between close and medium range. There's no need to play Widowmaker near the front line, and playing McCree from the back is just, well, hitting like a wet noodle. Does my hero have abilities that are key in fights, and can I use them effectively where I am? Flashbang detonates after what, about 5 meters of travel, while Venom Mine can be deployed from a great distance and simply left to its own devices really. If you're playing McCree so far back that you can never flash anything, not even a flanker going after your supports, maybe there's better places you can put yourself. Can my hero survive if focused, and does that survivability rely on abilities? To vary up the examples, Reinhardt can stay at the front line as long as he has some shield available. Even when it shatters, he probably still has enough health and armor to be able to tuck away somewhere a little bit safer. Meanwhile, Winston, with no cooldowns available, is just a huge sitting gorilla-shaped duck. How you position and what you can get away with is determined by what cooldowns you have available. And to make everything a little bit finicky, do I need to reposition quickly, and how soon will I need to do so? A Soldier 76 with tactical visor ready might want to start setting himself up to get an angle past an enemy Reinhardt, or maybe the Zenyatta just used Transcendence and you need to run over to get to him to get some healing. Overwatch is a dynamic game and you're going to have to adjust at times, it's part of what makes it fun. Just 4 questions, but hopefully they should inform you maybe on why a Doomfist wants to be near the front line but perhaps using line of sight to avoid taking damage, or why Anna wants to be safe and near the back. They should also hopefully inform you on why playing McCree as if he's just a Soldier 76 and standing on your own on a high ground position is god-awful if you aren't going to Deadeye soon. Sorry, it's a pet peeve of mine. Anyway, what makes Overwatch so damn complicated is, well, so far we've just kind of been looking at you in the context of a single hero. The thing is, there's 12 heroes in a game and they're all trying to put themselves in optimal positions, and there's a whole pile of maps and a bunch of game modes and they all favour different positions and goals and objectives. Then there's the fact that some team compositions need to play aggressively while some need to play more passively. This is also why I start laughing if someone says Overwatch is extremely simple and you just press Q to win, right? Some heroes are kind of simple. Reaper, for example, is going to spend most of his time standing next to his tanks and just blowing up whatever's in front of him. It's pretty obvious that standing 3 miles away and sniping at a fire in the sky isn't going to get much done with him, despite what the guy in your ranked game no doubt thinks. But some heroes are rather difficult. Soldier 76 can fill a number of positional roles, either staying in the core of the team to add some extra healing and some consistent damage, to being a pest on some high ground and being difficult to remove, to even being a relatively self-sufficient flanker. The key is the context of your team as a whole, so let's talk about team positioning. A few general rules of thumb. Standing on high ground is generally good. The ability to shoot down at people approaching and the ability to step back just for some cover is very, very powerful. Almost all defensive positions rely on controlling a choke point or a corner, some position where the enemy team gets funneled into your damage and attacks from an angle you're expecting them to. The ability to contest the objective quickly is always a huge plus, but in many situations killing the enemy team can be more important. Just, don't forget about the objective. We'll probably have to spend an episode on objectives and tactics around it at a later date. I mostly want to cover, well, there's basically, in my mind, 4 team types in Overwatch. I like to think that between these 4 you can generally figure out how you want to play and position yourself. Your team might not be 100% in one of these categories, but you can usually figure out that you're a blend of this and that, or your team is trying to do this. Understanding what type of team you're running is going to inform how you position in that team. These 4 types are Dive, Deathball, Pick, and Rushdown. Dive is the meta we're just sort of leaving. I don't think it'll ever truly go away. Well executed dive is going to be powerful as long as Tracer and Genji are pretty strong. Although at the time of writing, Mercy Change is probably going to make dive really tricky. Committing super hard just to force the enemy support to use a single ability is not great. Either way, dive teams thrive by avoiding damage until the last possible moment, and then usually engaging extremely hard all at once. Play to avoid being seen until the dive has begun, and when you go, go. If dive gets dragged into a long fight, especially over a long distance, it's usually pretty terrible. Dive teams generally revolve around high mobility heroes, Winston, D.Va, Tracer and Genji and the like, and supports that are going to be effective from a distance or tricky to remove, Zen and Lucio being the standard. Reliable support, a debuff to help the dive, the Zen can get picks, he's also just the weakest, most vulnerable target. Deathball was more the vogue during tank meta, although Pick can kind of also fit into how tank meta was played. Deathball comps usually revolve around a Reinhardt, playing heroes that want to stick together, Rein, Soldier, Lucio or Risa for example, and just crashing into the enemy team or setting up somewhere and just fighting. Ideally with a Deathball, most of the teams should be relatively close to each other, the supports in particular should be tucked in. Maybe one person can range around, but it's more up to them, and it shouldn't really be a constant thing. Bastion comps, Mei comps also fit into this kind of playstyle. You're setting up around the turret DPS or the wall and just fighting around that. If you're playing in a Deathball comp, just try to remember that your team functions best when everyone is together and doing pretty much the same thing. Flanks should be done carefully to quickly surprise and probably get some kills, but functionally, you never want to end up getting too spread apart. In Ranked, honestly, most people play a more Deathball style, even if they're trying to imitate a dive comp. It's just easier. Pick comps, however, are extremely difficult. They require a lot of game knowledge. Don't worry, we'll talk about the legendary superpower that Game Sense is another time, but usually revolve around Widow, Hanzo, and Roadhog. Pick comps usually rely on having a fluid position and punishing bad positioning from the enemy. Theoretically, if you have a Reinhardt on your team, you could probably play a game with an enemy Hanzo and never ever die to him. You can force the enemy team that's hunting for picks to overextend and then kill whatever's overextending. But we know that this doesn't actually happen from experience. The key with pick comps and positioning is this: you are first hunting and then you are engaging. People should be moving and adjusting to get a kill, but once the kill is done, the team should more come together and actually engage properly. Teams with a Widowmaker, for example, will usually play pick, but Pharmacy can actually be run very similarly, with the Pharmacy ranging forward, hunting for a kill, and then the rest of the team pushing in on the ground while the Pharmacy just continues engaging, using that extra cover from the team engaging on the floor. Roadhog was once also the king of pick comps. Doomfist has kind of taken his crown, but the theory still works. You play defensively until you get the pick, and then you engage. Finally, Rushdown. Rushdown is simply understanding that your team at close range does more damage than theirs, and there isn't really a damn thing the enemy team can do about that. Any team with Roadhog and Reaper in my mind is pretty much instantly a Rushdown comp. Rushdown positioning is, well, if you aren't in the enemy team's face, you're probably fucking up somewhere. Play around the point, fight around corners, get into the enemy team, and just kill everything. To round up, I want to emphasize two heroes that are extremely positioning sensitive, and everything they do kind of revolves around the concept: Roadhog and Mei. We spent a lot of time talking about good positioning, but Roadhog and Mei thrive on an enemy's bad positioning, and even have the tools that let them exploit this. They both have personal safety nets that let them self-heal, for example, if they need to extend to go and punish something. When playing Roadhog and Mei, you should be constantly monitoring how the team is setting up, how they're positioning, and does their Reinhardt, for example, have a habit of just wandering a bit too far forward? Does the Soldier 76 like poking himself out in front of the barrier? Does the Tracer come from the same side every single time? A team that splits apart, that doesn't cover properly, or just makes mistakes is very vulnerable to Mei and Roadhog. When people say things like "don't get hooked" or "don't get walled," it amuses me, particularly with the hooks, because quite honestly, getting hooked outside of a fight is usually a sign of overextension anyway, so take that as a cue to review your positioning. Right, we've already covered quite a lot. Positioning is just one lens which you can view Overwatch through, but an extremely important one, and one of the easiest, honestly, you can fix. The nice thing about positioning is it's very easy to VOD review. Sometimes you'll watch your games back and you'll go, wait, why was I stood there? And you'll catch yourself before you make the same mistake again in future. If you want to figure out more about what bad positioning is, well, just look for a lot of what the opposite is of what we were talking about. Playing at odds with your kit, doing things separate from the overarching objective of your team, or simply leaving yourself vulnerable for no real good reason. I'm looking at you, people who run in front of Reinhardt for no purpose. Now, while there's still a million things we can talk about, stuff like, sacrificing good positioning to hunt down kills, various other trade-offs you can get on good positioning to actually confirm kills and win the game, taking risks and taking chances, this has already gone on long enough. We'll cover that in another time, and also we'll refer back to this when we're doing Coaching the Many, for example. Thank you for watching to the end. I have been Josh's One Voice Amongst Many, and hopefully you feel a little bit better informed about what positioning is, how to approach applying good positioning, and maybe how to infer a little bit about bad positioning. It's a complicated topic, and one that, honestly, the pros still struggle with at times. Next time, we'll talk about objectives. It's a topic that I've covered before, but worth covering as part of this series. If you do like this series, then like, sub, all that fluff, you know what to do. Anyway, thank you guys for watching all the way through. Toodles.